Let's take a listen at this video from Colonel Douglas Macgregor, and then I'll throw in some of my own comments.
And right now, we know that the Israelis are running out of cash and missiles. And I'm sure we're trying to send them everything we possibly can. By the way, we have fired hundreds of missiles from our destroyers in support of the Israelis and their air defense against incoming Iranian missiles. We're about out. Our ships have to go back to port to reload. I know that our THAAD battery on the ground has had to fire virtually everything it has. There was an article that came out, I think, within the last 24 hours in a trade magazine where a representative from Raytheon admitted that we've got a real problem with rocket motors, and it affects certain classes of missiles. I think it's the Standard Missile 2, Standard Missile 6, can't remember, also AMRAAM, a number of missiles out there. Well, that's because we don't manufacture the rocket motors. We manufacture components. We're dependent on external sources for the rest of it. And he was simply saying, I don't think we can do much quickly. And then we had this business of 600 missiles a year. We've managed to increase that to 660 a year that we can manufacture. Listen, that's not going to work. You know, we want to be a great power. We want to be a superpower. Trump likes to grandstand about that. Well, I better find out what happened to the manufacturing base. When are we going to build a manufacturing base that can keep up? That's something the Russians and the Chinese don't have a problem with. We've got a serious problem with it. So all of these statements are ill-advised, these public statements from him, in my judgment.
Doug, I'm curious, how common or uncommon is it in the course of history of making announcements of the strikes that you're going to be making? And here it happened on both sides.
You're saying the Iranians did it. Well, I think they did it as a courtesy to us.
Right.
You have to remember, we are the ones that struck first. And we are the ones backing the Israelis. We are the ones that have opted for war with Iran. Iran's not interested in a war with us. And the Iranian leadership from day one has done everything in its power to avoid provoking us in any way. I think their attitude has been, let's not give the Americans an excuse to do even more than they're already doing for the Israelis. So let's back off as much as we possibly can. I still think that's their view. They will do everything they can to avoid attacking us, avoid any kind of collision with us. And so they picked out Qatar, which they knew was evacuated. That was one of the first places we evacuated. They picked the base. They told us we're going to go in there. They gave us a warning. We went in, destroyed everything, and then they left. Okay. In other words, it's tit for tat. Right. I think you'll always see that from the Iranians. They're not interested in a war with us. And that's very good, because if President Trump were very, very clever, he would exploit that to avoid being drawn in even more into Israel's war, as I said, not just with Iran, but with the whole Muslim world.
Do you think they're humbled enough, Doug, that they won't be as aggressive trying to re-enrich uranium as time goes forward?
I think they will have a nuclear weapon quite soon. And the reason I say that is that the lesson of all of this is that if you have a nuclear weapon, the United States and its friend Israel don't attack you. So the incentive now to build a nuclear weapon is greater than it's ever been.
Right.
And remember, we always had the option of embracing the idea of a nuclear-free zone in the whole Middle East that everybody would sign up for except Israel. Israel's special. Never forget that. Israel deserves everything. No one else deserves anything. And the Israeli position is we have to have these. It all begins with the Holocaust narrative, runs all the way through the 50s, 60s. In fact, in 1952, the Israelis began the process of trying to build nuclear weapons immediately. They wanted them. They felt they had to have them. But remember, it also confers an ability on Israel to, frankly, bully their neighbors. I mean, if you know that your little neighbor next door can march in, do a lot of damage on a conventional level, that's one thing. But if you fight back and you, for instance, manage to win on the battlefield, then you have to reckon that the nuclear weapons will be used against you. So they're not willing to give up this monopoly. That's a monopoly in the region. And that's also the foundation for hegemony. And that's what they want. And that's not just they. We'll talk about that in the future, about what else all of this means in the region, because the banking interests in New York City and the city of London are very interested in the outcome, just as they've been very interested in trying to destroy Russia. Now it's Iran. That's related. But I think we have to understand these things are connected. And now I think the game is up. You will see nuclear weapons in the hands of other countries in the Middle East.
Well, that ties in very specifically, I think, to this next soundbite that I have for you, because here I think, talking about the world economy and the markets, here is Trump reaching out, putting out, I guess, maybe a carrot on a stick for Iran. You tell me what you think about this.
Yesterday, you said China can now continue to purchase oil from Iran.
Yeah.
Are you giving up on your maximum pressure campaign? Because there are sanctions right now.
With who?
On Iran.
No, look, they just had a war. The war was fought. They fought it bravely. I'm not giving up. They're in the oil business. I mean, I could stop it if I wanted. I could sell China the oil myself. I don't want to do that. They're going to need money to put that country back into shape. We want to see that happen. No, if they're going to sell oil, they're going to sell oil. We're not taking over the oil. We could have, I used to say with Iraq, keep the oil. I could say it here, too. We could have kept the oil. No, China's going to want to buy oil. If they can buy it from us, they can buy it from other people. But you're going to have to put that country back into shape. It desperately needs money.
Is that a carrot, Doug, or is it more than a carrot? What is it?
I think it's another delusion. The idea of closing the straits is real, and the Iranian parliament voted to do it. I think for the moment, the Iranians have decided they don't need to do anything, because if this recommences, then the insurance companies that have to insure all the oil tankers won't insure them. And if you can't get insurance, what happens? Look at the transit to the Red Sea. It just stopped. No one was willing to insure the freighters, the large container ships. I think you'd have something similar happen in the Straits of Hormuz. So it's kind of moot. Now, they can also mine it. And that's quite easy. It's very easy to mine the Straits of Hormuz. And if they're mined, then that's an enormous pain in the neck that will take a long, long time to rectify. But here's the China connection that needs to be kept in mind. The Chinese obviously are very interested in sustaining the flow of oil out of the Persian Gulf. On the other hand, the Chinese have also made it very clear that they stand behind Iran and that they will provide Iran assistance. And I'm sure the Iranians have talked directly to them, as they have with President Putin in Moscow, and said, look, we may have to do this. I also think that the Russians would then double down and triple their petroleum output to supply the Chinese with what they need to make up for the shortfall. In other words, I know that President Trump likes to think that he's the master of the universe and controls everything, and he pitches everything from that vantage point, but we don't. And that should be borne in mind. But I'm glad that he brought it up because it demonstrates the strategic implications for what we've been doing in the Middle East. And that's why the notion that this war is over is just ridiculous. It's not.
This war is not over. And the simple reason for that is because Iran is not done with the nuclear program that Israel so wanted to stop Iran from getting that weapon, that bomb. And once we see that Iran has reached to that level where they will be coming out and announcing to the world that we do have a nuclear bomb, Israel, who they're going to go after, because when Israel was asked to stop producing a nuclear weapon, they assassinated John F. Kennedy, because that time John F. Kennedy was a president, and he said to Israel, you cannot have a nuclear weapon in the Middle East. What Israel will do once Iran has one? They cannot assassinate U.S. president, because the United States president will have nothing to do, literally, anything with Iran having a nuclear bomb. So what they're going to do? Well, they are going to be keeping the pressure up. They're going to keep the attacks on Iran continuous. And at one point they would want to, until they are relaxed, until they're convinced that, look, this is the point where we can just sit back and just forget about Iran's nuclear program. Until that happens, until Israel reaches to that level, they will always wage wars against Iran and other countries that would also include Iranian proxies, like in Lebanon or in Yemen. They will always want to find some way where they could have Iran under control, whether it is to attacking those proxies, or whether it is attacking Iran itself. As we know, that Israel now is facing huge setbacks when it comes to collecting intelligence from Iranian nuclear sites, because of the recent arrest. 700 people were arrested by Iran, and these people are believed to be spies for Mossad. So Israel is getting cornered. They do not really have much to do after this attack by B-2 bomber on these nuclear sites. What Israel will do next is something we will just have to wait and find out. But one thing we know without a shadow of a doubt, Israel is going to be attacking Iran, its proxies, and making the entire Middle Eastern countries very, very unstable. It's not a good news for Saudi Arabia. It's not a good news for Bahrain. It's not good news for anybody in the region, because this mad dog Israel is going to be out there to bite anyone and everyone in order to accomplish the mission, which they believe is to prevent Iran having a nuclear weapon. So we are just seeing the beginning of this war, not the end of it.
One more. Let me just put the cherry on the cake here. So then, the way everyone is in lockstep with what the narrative that they're trying to propose here. Here's J.D. Vance talking about what he sees, big picture wise, as to what all is going on.
The president's been extremely clear about America's national objective here. It is to create a world where Iran cannot build a nuclear weapon. We, of course, destroyed the nuclear program that they had, and the president told the entire team, we're going to work to make sure that they don't try to rebuild that nuclear capability in the future. For Israel, think about this. They've accomplished an important military objective. They've helped us destroy the Iranian nuclear program. They've also destroyed the conventional missile capability of Iran that threatened the country of Israel. For the Iranians, I think this is a new opportunity to actually pursue the path of peace. As I said yesterday, what the Iranians have showed through their support of terror networks, through their now failed effort to build a nuclear weapon, is that they're just not very good at war. And I actually think when we look back, we will say the 12-day war was an important reset moment for the entire region.
Doug, this
Really?
reminds me of George Bush on the USS Abe Lincoln with a big banner behind him, mission accomplished. Mm-hmm. We are victorious. Can you imagine him not regretting what he just said?
Well, if he's the vice president of the United States, he has an obligation to support the president. Never lose sight of that. Having said that, I'm not sure that he doesn't believe at least some of what he said. Mm-hmm. Now, let's look at it from the Iranian standpoint. Iran is not destroyed. Iran has not lost the war. Iran has thousands of missiles, including medium-range ballistic missiles, left with which to carry on the war. It has a manufacturing capability to build more missiles. So the notion that this is somehow another great loss for Iran and they have no choice now but to back down is foolish.
One thing that came on the media over and over again is how the analysts, including Western so-called experts, they're praising Iran for many reasons. One of them is Iran, the fact that they did not take any help, they did not activate any of these proxies like Hezbollah or Ansarullah. Nobody joined the war with Iran against Israel, the 12-day war. Why that happened? It is because Iran has such strength, they have so much power, and they're so confident in their ballistic missile technology that they don't think they need any help from Hezbollah or Ansarullah to defend their country. This is something that was being commanded by international community when they saw Iran has become so powerful that they are on their own, self-sufficient, do not need any help. And on top of all of this, as the colonel here, he said that Iran is producing these ballistic missiles, all of the things that you see, including the submarines and the surveillance drones, aircraft, everything that you see, these are locally made, and these are made in Iran, not made in China, not made in Russia. Iran has the technology and they have the know-how of nuclear weapon and how to build it. So you put together all of these things, you find a very strong Iran. On the other hand, you find a very weak Israel, which have become literally a laughingstock these days because of their behavior, the way they're acting, the way they're making things look like, and accomplishing nothing in the process.
He's describing when he says they can now choose a different road to peace. If you're an Iranian, that is the road to submission and subjugation by Israel. That is, you submit unconditionally, as President Trump would say, to whatever the Israelis demand. And I don't see that happening. I just don't. So I think the whole narrative at that point collapses. So I wouldn't worry too much about what's being said right now. I'd worry instead about the potential in the future for this thing to get out of control. Because behind all of this is the lingering possibility that we threaten Iran directly to do infinitely more damage, even to use potentially nuclear weapons. I hope not. But that would very definitely bring us into direct confrontation with Russia and China, and probably a lot of other people. So does this cost him anything? I don't think so at this point.
Right. No. I hear you on that. Doug, you had sent over and listened to all what's going on, is certainly taking the limelight, limelight's not the word, but focus, I guess, on what's going on in Gaza. And you had alerted me to a report that was done by Harvard. Can you tell us a little bit about this study?
Well, it's entitled a Harvard-linked study, and it essentially says there were almost 2.3 million people living in Gaza at the time the campaign to mass expel or murder the people in Gaza. They're down to 189,000. And this particular study suggests that there could be as many as 400,000 Palestinians who've been killed or maimed, but I think largely it's about killing. And I encourage people to read it simply because this is not something that was concocted in Iran or in the back room somewhere in China or anywhere else, which is usually the assertion. Oh, well, this is disinformation.
Right.
This is linked to Harvard. And I think people should look at it and understand how terrible this has been. And that's why I say this war is not over. And the war will not end until this Gaza war is ended. Everybody acts as though, well, who cares about Gaza? This is really just about Iran and Israel. No, it's not. It's not. This is about the Jewish state that does not simply want hegemony in the region. It wants to dominate the region, but also, most important, it's trying to ethnically cleanse all those that it doesn't want inside its borders. That's not going to stop. And apparently we are complicit in all of this. We're helping this along. No one is talking about it in the United States. But it is getting a lot of attention everywhere else. And that's why I say it's not just war with Iran. It's war with the whole Muslim world. And more people in Africa, Latin America, Asia, they're all watching this. And it's horrific.
And we also know that Putin's watching it. And Trump was asked about Putin's his relationship with Putin at this point in time.
Joint Chiefs of Staff.
General Kane.
Yes, he has said that Mr. Putin has territorial ambitions beyond Ukraine. Do you view that in the same way?
Possible. I mean, it's possible. I know one thing. He'd like to settle. He'd like to get out of this thing. It's a mess for him. He called the other day. He said, can I help you with Iran. I said, no, you can help me with Russia. Because, in the last few weeks, we took care of India and Pakistan, Kosovo, Serbia. No, I consider him a person that's, I think, been misguided. I'm very surprised, actually. I thought we would have had that settled easy. I've settled 4 of them in the meantime. But he did call up and he said, he's close to Iran. He'd like to help us get a settlement. I said, no, you help me get a settlement with Russia. And I think we're going to be doing that too. Yeah.
Not surprising there, Doug, right?
No, it's part of the master of the universe narrative. And I never criticize presidents for taking credit for something good that happens on their watch, whether or not they have anything to do with it, because they're always blamed for anything bad that happens on their watch, whether or not they have anything to do with it. I would dismiss all that crap about how I've settled all these things and everything's better and so forth. Having said that, the Russians are settling things in Ukraine, and they're going to continue to settle those things. And this is going to end when the Russians have decided to end it. And I think the Europeans increasingly know that. And it's not going to make a great deal of difference what we say or do. They're prepared for all the sanctions and all the crippling attempts that we've made to harm them. They're familiar with it. I mean, this is nothing new. The other thing that we need to keep in mind is that international relations is not about personal relationships. Anybody who spends time in private with President Trump, I would think, I certainly did, likes President Trump. I like him. Has absolutely nothing to do with the state of affairs between Russia, the United States, or anybody else.
But don't you think Trump? Don't you think Trump? It does that the way he approaches it, that it does depend on personal. At least he talks about it like it depends on charisma and personal relationships.
Well, that's a mistake, and unfortunately, that goes with a personality profile. That's the way he thinks of things, with himself at the center of everything. But that's not true. Now, he talked about, does he have interest beyond Ukraine? He said, well, it's possible. Well, that's an improvement over the other day, because a few weeks ago he departed from his earlier arguments before Christmas and at the beginning of his term that Russia had no interest in attacking Eastern Europe, and he started to adopt the neocon narrative that has been propelling this war pointlessly for years, and said, "Oh no, yeah, they'll go in there. That's why NATO is so important." I think a lot of it has to do with whatever somebody said to him before he said something. I think he's very, very.
When it comes to international politics, especially Iran and Israel, what is happening between them, I don't think that Putin will be sitting on the sideline for too long. His right-hand man, Dmitry Medvedev, he already said that any country will be giving Iran a nuke if they need one against Israel and United States. Therefore, we now have a bipolar world power or world order, if you like, where one hand you see United States and Israel and European Union dominating or trying to dominate. On the other hand, you have China, Russia, and the rest of the south of the world teaming up together. Are we going to be seeing inevitable clash at the end of the day? This is what I fear the most, and unfortunately looks like this is what is going to be happening very, very soon. Subscribe to my channel. See you in the next video.